Coffee cans down below there, and I've got some duct tape I just brought up here somewhere. So when we disassemble a component, we'll put duct tape on the can and right where those bolts are, so when we go to reassemble it, we don't have a big box of miscellaneous bolts that we have to try and figure out go where. Okay? Now, a couple things for safety's sake. Okay? I want everybody to become involved, and we're going to take our time. And if I see you doing something unsafe, I may yell at you. And I'm not yelling at you because I'm an a-hole. I'm yelling at you to stop doing something because you might hurt yourself or somebody else. Okay? If you have a question about something, I say, hey, rip that bolt out, and you're like, well, I'm not sure how to do it. Okay, ask me. Okay? I'll tell you. That's why you're here. This is called an education. Okay. If you see something that's not safe, a condition, a tool's damaged, or you notice some bolts might be loose holding the engine up or something, let me know. All right? But if I bark out an order, it's not a Republican here, it's a dictatorship. If I tell you to do something, I need it done. There's a reason, and after the situation is rendered safe, I'll explain to you why I said what I said. Okay? Everybody okay with those ground rules there? And again, I don't mind you bringing out your coffees and whatnot, just as long as you know you pack it in, you pack it out. I know the weather's going to be a little chilly and whatnot. So that's where we're at with that. Okay. There's my toolbox. I've got it unlocked, so we'll use the tools in here. I have some bigger wrenches and ratchets in there we may use from time to time. Okay. So let's go ahead and start disassembling this motor, this engine. And we'll start by taking off our crossover off the head, and then we'll pull our valve cover. And then we'll remove our intake system. So who wants to begin? Have at it. Okay. I think I have some glovies here.
Did you bring your dog in here or something?
Could I? Yeah, I will. Actually, no, they got the water off in the restroom, and I was like, don't laugh, we got the spray to match it. We were
That's why
gonna.
California's the Golden State.
That's it. I'll tell you what, just by looking at that, that's a healthy dog. I was gonna put a spray paint like little pieces of carrots and celery in there, maybe some peanuts. All right. Hey, when you leave Frank and I alone unattended, stuff happens. That happens. That happens.
I just put a nix on that.
All right, well, this isn't going to disassemble itself. Well, I heard you throw me under the bus yesterday.
It smelled really bad in here.
Someone
I
give
think
me
it was the water or stuff that was all over because it
Oh, that
flooded.
little sink leak.
You just take it off from here.
It was like Lake Erie in here, man.
It was
It was a 2-inch pipe.
Pretty good.
wrong size
It
extension.
let some water out. This was flooded. The hallway was flooded.
I knew what they were fixing because I saw it on Monday.
I guess they're getting parts now because he's got a cap in there. He's got the water back on.
No biggie. Defecation occurs.
Did me a favor. This is as clean as these floors have been in a while.
Came in here?
Yeah. Came in here, got to classroom 2, got down the hall. I mean, it was literally squish as I came up the hallway. I knew there was a problem with the back lab doors.
They
were all
put two
open.
different sizes of nuts on it.
So not only
Remember
are
who
you
did
doing your
that?
little Charlie Chaplin walk, you have question too?
That one's not a 10.
Did you break my...
Did that size work?
That
Not
one's
working?
That one's not a 10.
What is that? Like a battery pack?
My solar charger. Solar, and then it has a bright light.
How long does that last?
Well, I can use the phone the whole day with this. Yeah.
I'd rather have one of those things that holds all the sockets, you know, and we just have it right there, you know.
Get your impact, man. It's faster.
That one.
Enough with that. Get an impact.
Yeah. What are you putting those?
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
The only thing is those bolts are both different.
So how are they supposed to organize the bolts?
Can someone give me a?
Right here. Take it off. Right.
Yeah. Can someone give me a flat? Should we?
No, I want.
You want the
take
whole one
the whole
piece?
thing's
Okay,
coming
that's
off.
cool.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
that's about a 10 or 12.
That's a 10. I got 11 here, so that's probably.
Why are you using half inch driver? Why don't you use a 3/8?
Yeah, I could do
This, I
that.
need the
Because he
leverage.
just put,
Wait, what am I
I got all
doing?
the tools there.
putting it on the top of the can.
It says retarder bolts, so just cover that up.
Yeah. Keep the markers by your phone.
Then I need to.
And what do we name this?
EGR.
There we go.
EGR crossover.
And I need
Is that what it came from?
EGR?
Now, what he's talking about, and when we get into emissions, we'll talk about it further, but one of the ways we lower the oxides of nitrogen, which creates that beautiful brown layer of smog that we've all grown accustomed to, is we cool the combustion chamber. Okay? And one of the ways we do that is we take some of the exhaust gases out of the exhaust system, run them through the cooler here, and then reintroduce it into the fuel inlet system to be distributed into the combustion chambers. Now, once the exhaust comes out of the engine, it's what they call an inert gas. It will not burn and it will not release heat. There's a lot of people out there today that think that the reason we put exhaust gases back in the engine is to burn any leftover oxygen or fuel, and that's not even close to being the truth. The exhaust gases, when they enter the engine, are about 600-700 degrees. That might seem hot, but when we put 600 or 700 degrees into a combustion chamber that's approaching 2,600 degrees, that's like air conditioning. Okay? And so once we lower that temperature, 2,600 degrees, that's kind of a magic number, because above 2,600 degrees, the nitrogen in the air is starting to oxidate, meaning becoming oxygen rich, turning into oxides of nitrogen, causing smog. Guys, what's the deal?
Here we go. You were talking. Keep going.
He's being considerate of you.
So
So Mike, why would that cool it? Wouldn't the ambient air be even cooler?
Yeah, drawing ambient air and putting it into the engine. Yeah, they did that back in the 70s in automotives with smog pumps. Didn't work real well. It's something to do with administering it into the coolant. They couldn't build enough pressure to overcome the exhaust pressure in the manifold to get it into the engine. So by using the pressure of the exhaust and the temperature, we could go through an EGR valve, and under specific conditions, high pressure into low pressure. So one of the things we have to have is low intake manifold pressure to put the exhaust gases into the engine. Okay? We don't need EGR gases to cool the combustion chamber when the engine's under wide open throttle under heavy load because it's running as most efficient. So where we need EGR gases is idling, partial load, cruising.
keep those bolts.
My '67 Mustang GT 390 had a air pump on it.
Yep,
That was the first thing I took off.
yep. Okay, take these little bolts off. We'll pull the spark plugs out. There's no plugs yet, but I want to pull the coils off.
Coil cap?
These are the individual coils that fire the spark plugs.
Where are the valves at? Oh.
that'll come off.
I said I would take that damn hose off first.
This hose,
This way. Oh, there you go.
it's all eyesore, huh?
There's where experience plays a part.
I might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. 'Twas the night before. Hey, get that shit out of here, man.
Alright, so this is, so.
Go put it. Go put it on Gunny's chair.
You want him to take this off too, or?
Yeah, we're gonna pull. No, we're gonna pull that off as a unit. So we're gonna pull the whole fuel control module off the engine.
Oh, okay.
All right, what are you doing there? Nope.
This one? No?
Nope. Right here.
Okay.
Let's get our sparky plug coils out.
Are there any oil caps?
Okay, let's yank Mr. Valve cover off.
Yeah. That's the valve cover?
Mm-hmm. Valve cover, rocker arm cover.
This is our fuel.
So we need another one.
Yeah, I'm working.
I like to do that one.
Oh, that one? Did I not get it? I thought I wrote
That can be a little stubborn. Okay, roll that. Alrighty, now these are your rocker arm covers. These are your rocker arms, your valves. Now, this is where the engine breathes. This is the top end of the engine. Okay.
What is that called again?
These are your rocker arm valves. Okay. The valve closest to the exhaust side, exhaust manifold right here, is the exhaust valve. Okay. This is what they call a 12-valve head. I got 2 valves per cylinder. I have 6 cylinders. Okay. Other engines will have 4 valves per head. So what they'll do is to allow one rocker arm to open 2 valves, the rocker arm will push down on a bridge. The bridge will be across the 2 valves, and as the rocker arm pushes down, the bridge opens the 2 valves just using one rocker arm. Okay, now when we talk about setting valve lash or valve clearance, it's the distance between the top of the rocker arm, the bottom of the rocker arm here, and the top of the valve. Okay, so I would set it with a feeler gauge. This is a feeler gauge. Okay. It's pieces of steel that are machined to a specific thickness. So for instance, this gauge, this type of feeler gauge is called a go, no-go gauge. If you run your finger across it, you'll feel a little bump. So for example, the one I'm holding says 13 thousandths, 15 thousandths. So what that means is if it slides through relatively easy but stops at the bump, like this one does, we can assume it's 14 thousandths of an inch. Okay? And that's exactly where you check your valve lashes, between the rocker arm and the valve.
And the valve that you're doing has to be closed.
Yeah, that's why you saw me doing this. Like, if it's closed, I can rotate the push rod tube because it's got no tension on it. Okay, if it's open or trying to open, I can't spin the push rod tube like this one. It won't turn, so that means the rocker arm's under pressure. And I can't check a gap if it's trying to open. Okay? So this would be considered your valve train or top end. Okay? The valves are housed in the cylinder head. The cylinder head forms the top of your combustion chamber. We'll take this thing off and you'll get a better look at it here when we get that far. We okay so far?
But in order to start actually doing the valve adjustment, you gotta find top dead center.
You got to
Yeah.
properly position the engine. In fact, the way we can do that Here, let me steal this out real quick. Okay, so I'm going to bar the engine over, and I'm going to use companion cylinder method, valve overlap method. Who remembers what valve overlap is? The same time, exactly. So I'm going to bar the engine over in the direction it turns while it's running. Now, if I don't know which way this turns, let's say I'm working in a boat shop, and boats will have engines that spin clockwise and counterclockwise. Okay? How would I determine which way this engine turns when it's running? Have we got an idea? I watch my valves. The valves have to open, close, stay closed for combustion, and then open for exhaust. Intake, compression, power, exhaust. So I'm going to watch my valves. If I bar my engine over, the intake valve opens, and then it's immediately followed by the exhaust valve, am I going in the correct direction? No, because that's not how it works. It doesn't go intake, exhaust, whatever. So I'm going to pick a set of valves that are moving, and it's number 6 over there, or number 4. 3. Okay, so there's my exhaust valve. Look at that, it's got so much power, it's moving on its own. No, I took them out because I got tired of fighting it. Okay. So it looks like it's going correctly because the intake valve opened.
So the E that,
Yeah, I marked it that way. Okay, which one are we watching? Let's watch this one. What valve is that? That's the intake. So that just closed, correct?
Yep.
Now, if the exhaust begins to open, I'm going the wrong direction. If I can continue to rotate the engine and the exhaust valve stays closed, that means it's coming up on compression. Stayed closed, didn't it? Now, if I go backwards, that's the wrong direction. It doesn't go intake exhaust. It goes intake, compression, power. So you've got 2 strokes where the valves don't move. Okay. So now if I want to set this one up to adjust it, I'm going to put that one in overlap. So I'm going to bar the engine over in the direction that it rotates. I'm going to watch my intake valve, and it just closed, so I got to continue to bar it. Should be coming up here. Okay, there goes my exhaust valve. Now I'm going to move the engine. I'm going to rotate the engine until my exhaust valve is almost closed and my intake valve begins to open. That means it's starting the overlap period. Not yet. Now it did. It just started to go down. This guy's closed. If 6 is an overlap, 1 is closed. Right here, Lorraine. I know it's an overlap because the intake valve was, or the exhaust valve was closing, and the intake valve just started to open. So that means this guy, because these are companion pairs, 1 and 6, this guy's at top dead center. So now the engine is set up properly to set your valve lash. Now, hot rodders will do it the long way. They'll do every cylinder using the companion cylinder format. So when he gets done with 6, he'll put 5 in overlap and do 2. He'll put 3 in overlap and do 4. 3 in overlap and do 4. So
Kind of confusing.
it is and it isn't. And then he'll put this in overlap and do that, this in overlap and do that, and this in overlap and do that. You've got to spin the engine over many times. Right now, since I've got 6 in overlap, I can do intake, exhaust on 1, intake on 2, exhaust on 3, intake on 4, exhaust on 5. Then I turn it 1 rotation, intake, exhaust on 6, and then all the other ones I didn't do. So I got to spin it
You
over.
can do each one cylinder at a time too.
Well, that's what I just said, using the valve overlap method. Yeah. That takes a while. Is it any more of a precise setting? Probably not. Probably not. Okay, so that's how you would set it up to run your valve lash, and we'll do that when we reassemble this thing. Okay, so we got our valve cover off. What I want to do now, I want to pull my fuel control module off. I'm going to take these bolts out here. This is heavy, so when you get ready to remove it, have someone help you lift it up, and we'll just set it on the floor and slide it under there. Yeah, there you go. Okay, do we have a can for my... Awesome.
What you call this thing? Fuel what?
Fuel control module.
Fuel control module.
That is the metering system that administers fuel into the intake manifold of the engine.
They tell me that it's easier to remove this to get to your computer down there.
I wouldn't argue that with you, because the way that is in the bus, the computer's hooked up behind the battery box by the, yeah, I wouldn't argue that point with you. You're still going to be at it for a day. To get to this, yeah, you're at it for a day, easy. And even when this was a diesel, you had your fuel injection pump there, it was still short. That's why you wanted to change anything but that ECM if you could.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, now is somebody holding on to that so when he starts getting these bolts loose, it doesn't fall on your feet? Because that'll really screw up your square dance. Alright, we got them all out. Yeah, I gotta take those 3 out there. Yep. Yep.
Longer?
Yep.
Considerably.
Okay, you got it? Because I'd hate to scratch the paint on that thing. Oh, my toe! Hey, your blood matches the same color as the motor. That's it. That's it. Lowers the workers' comp claim. You don't know that.
He's gotta get
Go home,
that
and then it's too late to do anything about it. That's right.
Doing a good job. Patience.
I don't need patience. I'm not a doctor. All right.
look at that.
How about we slide it right on the deck there? Now, go ahead. Go ahead. Slide it on the deck.
On the deck, on the bottom?
Yes, please. Oh, you scratched my table. Damn it! That's good. Thank you very much. All right. So when we talk about fuel, we will talk about that particular module, but that's where we take fuel from the tanks. We run it through a regulator, fuel pressure regulator, and drop it from tank pressure to about 150 pounds of pressure. Then we run it into secondary regulator on the Cummins side of the house and drop it further, drop the pressure of the fuel further. And inside this module, there's sensors to read the module temperature, the module pressure, the flow rate, and there's 2 control solenoids that will control the flow, turn it on so it can flow, and the other one will meter the flow into the engine, the flow control valve and the flow valve. Okay, so all that metering and sensing and looking at is done there. So the fuel will be metered through the module. The air will be fed in right through here. Okay? So the air will come in from the turbocharger into the engine. And the volume of air, oh, what the hell, he's put on the table. The volume of the air will be read by a sensor here. So the module will look at how much air is coming into the engine, how much fuel is coming into the engine. Where's my fuel glass? Fuel flow sensor. I have a sensor on it. Mass fuel flow sensor here that tells it the volume of air. I've got sensors that tell me the pressure and the temperature of the air. So when I know pressure, temperature, and volume, I can calculate the mixture and density when I mix the 2. Fuel air. So I'll know the density of it, the pressure of it, the temperature of it. I have a little throttle door in here, little flapper valve, that's used to modulate the amount of air coming into the engine in relationship to the amount of fuel I'm letting into the engine, and this is all done via the computer. When the 2 meet, they're administered into the intake manifold right here. So the fuel air is mixed here, and then if you look in there, you can kind of see the valves. Let me go get me flashlight.
What's the minimum fuel pressure needed?
It's about 50 pounds and then it shuts off.
No.
I'm like looking at your screen and it's so
Yeah.
dark.
It's really dark. Does your flashlight work? I don't know how to turn it on at the same time.
Alrighty.
Aquí se encendió.
Okay.
Vamos a
Now.
ver si se flasha.
Does that help? Mm-mm.
If you kind of look in there. Oh, I'm sorry. Are
It's
you alright?
okay. Yeah, I'm
Okay,
good.
good.
I was being nosy here.
Right there, that's the valve when it opens, will allow air to flow into the engine. That's your intake valve. Okay?
Got it.
All right, so this is your intake manifold. Okay, and it's cast as one part of the head. Now, this is not a performance deal, not by any stretch of the imagination. But it provides adequate power and keeps the engine within the emissions specifications. Okay. All right. So again, fuel and air is admitted into the intake manifold via the fuel flow control valve that's monitored by and controlled by the engine's ECM based on input from temperature, pressure, and flow sensors all throughout the fuel control module. Okay. This portion of it is for the administration of exhaust gases to be reintroduced into the intake manifold based on the engine's load and speed. Okay? And all this is configured by the ECM. It calculates the values, it looks at the emissions through the O2 sensor, and we'll talk about that later, and it decides if the conditions are right, how much exhaust gases to allow into the engine to cool the exhaust to reduce nitrous of oxides of nitrogen.
That gasket that goes on there, does that go on dry, or
Most of them go on dry.
you don't need to put any of the gasket buildings?
No, no. In fact, if you do that, you might be building in a leak. Most of the modern gaskets, you're talking about the older gaskets where you had to put in gasket cinch.
Uh-huh.
Or gas
Okay.
switch.
Yeah, to kind of help. This orange stuff on it, that's
enough.
That's enough. That's enough. That's a great question that you ask, because many guys will put these things together using old school stuff. Oh, I'll put some RTV on it to help it. Modern gaskets, you don't have to do that. You're probably shooting yourself in the foot on that. And by the time you get this thing all back together and fired up and realize it's leaking, oh, are you not going to be a happy camper? Right? Okay, any questions so far? We good? All right, let us pull off my EGR cooler here, and we'll pull off the exhaust manifold. Okay? So let's undo this clamp.
Okay.
We'll pull these bolts. Actually,
Need a,
no, we can't. So we'll go ahead and actually,
you can't leave this on.
no. What we'll do, might be able to get the manifold off first. I always goof this part up. Yeah, let's
So you
go
wanna
ahead.
take it off,
Take
the whole
take
exhaust
the
manifold off?
take. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take this clamp. Take this clamp loose.
Okay.
That way, the manifold and cooler all fall in one unit. I think. The worst part of it will be that bolt there. So here's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna pull that bolt and that bolt.
Oh, I got it. Right on that
Yep.
big one. Bigger.
We'll
Take
leave
this
that.
clamp-
Let's
leave
leave that.
it on?
Yeah, let's
Okay,
just
yeah,
leave
let's
that
leave
for
it
now.
on.
We'll just
Okay,
pop that
okay.
bad bear loose.
Sure.
I always screw up when I do this one.
Yeah.
I only get to tear these down once a year. Other way. There you go.
This is the cooler, right?
That is, yeah, there's nothing in it. It's 20 dry, but yeah.
But this is the cooler, right?
This is the exhaust gas recirculation cooler. So it has water coming into it, coming out of it, and it's got exhaust gases entering it, and it's just a bunch of copper tubes filled with water with hot exhaust gases going over it. Okay, and then it comes from the cooler, EGR cooler into the valve, and it's into the intake. So it comes out of the engine hot, the exhaust gases. We cool them further, and then we reintroduce them into the engine. I gotta drop this bad bear down.
Hey, Frank. Oh, Mike.
Yes.
Why does that-
You called me Frank.
Hey.
Come here. Get on your knees for your beating.
Why does it in here? Why does it filled with so much like black? So yeah.
That might be you have exhaust gases leaking in there, but that wouldn't leak black because the gases are so clean it doesn't have the soot like a diesel. You see there's black in there?
Yeah. Why? Some of
That's the cooler, right?
What was it?
When you opens it up, and that's what you see on
Oil consumption. Could be, yeah, could be passing oil, and that's that oil being baked off in there. You know. Yep. Now, once you get those two off, we're going to start loosening up
This one, this one.
these bolts here. We'll take the top ones out. We'll leave the bottom ones in. I'm going to need a couple of folks to hold on to this because it's going to be kind of heavy when we go to remove it.
This one, say this one.
You might need a ratchet for that one.
I know, I just want
How's the other side?
What?
What part is this?
This is the exhaust gas recirculation cooler, EGR cooler. If you look in here, Vanessa, you can see that. Right down in there, you see those
So
copper
this is the
tubes?
cooler, right?
That's where the, right. And then the exhaust gas is right across the cooler and exits the motor. Exhaust EGR, exhaust gas recirculation and cooler. Yep. Yeah, now be careful, we want to make sure we got a
Okay.
good hand on this when we pull all these out.
So maybe leave the end one in a little bit.
Yep, good.
Okay.
Don't take.
You don't have another extension longer?
Why are you using half
Hold
inch?
it, Mike,
Yeah.
hold, hold.
Well, it's still in
It's
there.
still
You-
there?
No, you got a lot of parts there. You're
Okay.
good.
I don't know how many more.
Yeah, he's gotta loosen up these here.
Remove on the other side.
No, we gotta find one.
Well, some of them they're still tight. Let me see.
No, I got this one. Which one do you need?
On the top.
The top? Those loose already?
No.
No. Those gonna be these ones here.
These two.
What? Oh, yeah, this is, yeah. This is gonna have to come off, it looks like.
It lifts right out of there.
Oh, this
You
clamp?
can take that off, but it lifts right off the pipe.
Oh, it does.
Now, when we go to take that off, but go ahead and pull it off of there. Get that loose, that's like a 8mm or something.
Got it?
Let's work on that top one next. I want to get all the top off first.
Well, that's good that it's loose.
Now that one you might be better off going like this. Maybe. We'll see.
Look, how about this one? this one.
I need a short. Go grab that short extension off that other ratchet. And why are you guys piling tools up over there? See that one?
Oh yeah, I know, fine. He wants to get the bolts on top first.
Should I take this one too, Mike? This one? Is that okay?
Yeah, if it's already loose.
It's already loose.
I got it. That's the last one, right?
You need little hands?
Got it.
Look, look.
Yeah. It's coming. Normally you guys would probably get the turbocharger off, but you can still get to it.
Get ready. It's coming.
All right, that one's out. We'll get,
You got that one?
it's just laying there. It'll come out later. You can get it.
See, told you need little hands.
That's right.
Those ones are
Hold it,
cracked
hold
open or
it,
not?
hold it.
What's that?
Hey Mike, why didn't you remove the EGR first?
I could, but it's a pain.
Oh. Seems really easy.
You don't have a flat hand around here, or? No. You can pull it off there, you do like to take, just get back.
Muscle it off.
You already damaged that O-ring on there. You gotta put a new one on
Oh, this one.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That makes like, that is a major source of, how many of those of you have leaked?
All of them.
Shitload.
You can never salvage that. You gotta put a new one on.
No.
Why they don't, they always try and get away with already using it.
comes in the kit anyways.
I'm gonna use it. It's easier to store all that stuff under there than to close the
The
house.
banjo, the O-rings, those are
Yeah, and when they leak, they set off the gas injector. Okay, so we had a poor guy, he was troubleshooting this 50% LEL in the engine bay. He called the sheriff's, fire department, everything was there. They towed it back in,
67.
This is,
checking the log.
I could grab it, so you can
Mira,
put them
¿cuánto
for
más?
And it was the banjo clamp.
Yeah, I just replaced those there.
Where that's at is right near that, Siggy's Big Gas Station channel light on
the bottom one.
the display.
oh, there's one right here.
I know.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, there are two more.
yeah. You want me to help you get on that?
So we need this one and that one. You need flashlight?
No. I'm just gonna take it off because it's kinda hard to get your hand in there.
Hey, is that the last one there?
No.
That's it. We get ready.
What about those pipes, the coolant pipes? The turbo.
And we hold it.
Yeah.
That's it, that's it.
That needs to come off.
Oh, you get it.
Oh, these ones here?
No.
Oh, we're gonna take. This is what's on here. Yeah, I got.
I wouldn't do it that way if I was you.
Huh? Just wanted to try something different.
These need to come out.
There you go.
Oh, damn.
Got it.
That's a unit.
Put that on the clamp. All right. Now,
We put this on the
Over here.
clamp. No, no. I'll put it on the clamp.
go ahead and pull
Yeah.
these off. Because you can't get that one out with the exhaust manifold in place. That one won't come out. That's why you gotta do it that way. I don't know why they did that.